I think we should tell people like what he's about.
We're all ears.
I think he gave a terrific announcement speech.
Okay.
And just to give you some background for the younger viewers who may not know. So Robert F. Kennedy, his father, ran for the Democratic nomination in 1968 after his brother John F. Kennedy had been president, was assassinated, as we know, in the early 1960s. What happened is, at this time, before the 1968 election, Lyndon B. Johnson was the incumbent Democratic president, and everyone thought that he'd be the party's nominee and he was going to get reelected. And he was brought down by an extremely unpopular war, the Vietnam War. And it was RFK Jr.'s father who was a great critic of the Vietnam War, and he ran for the Democratic nomination. And I think that he very likely would have gotten it. On the night that he won the California primary, he was assassinated.
By Sirhan, right?
Yeah. If you go back and look at the things that he was saying in that campaign, he really was saying a lot of beautiful things that are in his son's ad that I think would be worth playing here. But I think you have maybe the setup for a similar situation here. You've got an incumbent Democratic president who is sort of not that popular. He's sort of old and out of it and incoherent. He's presiding over a war that is rapidly becoming a debacle. You don't hear so much about the spring counteroffensive anymore. These new Pentagon papers that were leaked show that the Ukrainian casualties are at least 5 times greater than they've been publicly admitting. It looks like Russia's certainly not losing the war the way they used to be. They've captured 90% of Bakhmut, which has been the most violent, bloody battle of the war. And Biden at this point has no strategy to bring that to an end. In fact, he's rejected multiple attempts at a peace deal. And so now it looks like it's the Chinese who are in the driver's seat, potentially putting together some sort of diplomatic settlement. So I think, listen, if the economy ends up going into recession and this war ends up becoming the fiasco that it's increasingly looking like, you could have a setup like 1968, where people are wondering, why the hell is this guy our nominee? And let me tell you, RFK Jr. is already polling at 19%, which I think is pretty good, considering he just came out of the gate and people don't even know the substance of his campaign yet. Marianne Williamson's at 9%. So if she dropped out, you'd be at 28% for the alternative. Yeah. And I think he could go up from here. And I think if you watch the speech he gave, I thought there was a lot of really beautiful sentiments in there.
It's very good.
He said that Biden has made Ukraine a pawn in a geopolitical battle that has put the flower of Ukraine's youth into an abattoir of death in order to exhaust Russia. He channeled America's anti-war traditions. He quoted John Quincy Adams that America should not go abroad in search of monsters to destroy. He quoted Martin Luther King Jr. There is a direct link between poverty and violence and oppression at home and war abroad. He talked about the role of the CIA during his uncle's administration, where he said that John F. Kennedy eventually realized that the purpose of the CIA had become to create a steady pipeline of wars to feed the military-industrial complex. And he talks about how JFK came to distrust the CIA and realized that it was lying to him. And the biggest applause line of his speech was when he quoted JFK approvingly saying that he wanted to take the CIA and shatter it into 1,000 pieces and scatter it to the winds. And this very same week that he gave the speech, we found out that 5 former CIA directors had participated in a giant hoax on the American people by claiming that this Hunter Biden story was Russian disinformation. They knew it was not. They knew it was not. The information on the hard drive was real. It showed that Hunter Biden received multi-million-dollar payments from foreign governments, including China and Ukraine, okay? And regardless of what you think of that story, it should not have been suppressed by social media, and it certainly should not have been suppressed in a psyop by 51 former intelligence officials, including 5 former directors of the CIA. And if that's the way they're going to behave, if they're going to meddle in American politics that way, I think we do need to start over. We do need to ask what's going on with the security state. They're not supposed to be meddling in American politics that way. So I think if this is the way they're going to act, I say shatter away. Scatter that thing into 1,000 pieces.
Hey, it's Catholic. I'll vote for him.
And he's called out the insanity of COVID lockdowns and mandates.
I mean, that's the thing that I guess that's the big controversy is he's an anti-vaxxer. I guess that's the one thing they're trying to position him as.
And he does a little bit of conspiracy theory stuff.
Sure, I mean.
So listen, if you go back and look at his record, he was an environmental activist for most of his career.
Time. He did the Watershed Project in New York, where they basically bought the land along the Hudson. I remember I was at some events for it. They wanted to clean the Hudson up. and they just bought the land and people donated the land and they bought it, they raised money. And the Hudson today has it's flourishing amazingly. Right. And he's directly responsible for that.
He was a big critic of the way that corporate greed could lead certain big companies to engage in environmental pollution. And at a certain point, he realized that big pharma had a similar incentive. Now, I don't know if he was right about those vaccines, but I do know that he's right in the case of COVID. They had an incentive to push this dubious mRNA shot on us so that we get boosted a zillion times. And he's right about that. He was right about the fact that this should never have been mandated. We shouldn't have the lockdowns. And you know what? In his nomination speech or his declaration, the word vaccine was only mentioned once. So this is not what his campaign is about.
I look forward to having him on.
And to be honest, I mean, look at all the other things that were deemed to be conspiracy theories that ended up being true.
Oh, yeah.
Loch Ness Monster.
Yeah.
Not that.
Could go either way. It could be a Pulitzer or it could be embarrassing. Let me ask you this, Sachs. If it was him versus Trump, who do you vote for?
Well, I'm gonna reserve.
RFK.
RFK versus Trump, Sachs.
I'm not going to take a position on the general yet, but in the Democratic primary, I'm definitely endorsing RFK Jr. in the Democratic primary.
Okay,
vote in the Democratic primary.
I would if I could. I'll do an event for him.